Okay, so everyone, picture yourself in the courtyard of a prison. You're walking around doing your daily routine, and all of a sudden, someone pulls out a knife. Sooner or later, everyone's going to be stabbing each other around. You're going to see blood everywhere, bodies piling up, and at that moment, you're going to be pretty scared. Even the prison guards are going to be getting killed, and you're not going to know what to do. You then begin to think to yourself, I really might not make it alive, and that's some scary thoughts. So, Richard and the ladies and gentlemen of this classroom, this is a harsh reality of the United States prison. Anything could happen because of the overwhelming number of inmates. Today, I want to describe for you the key problems of overcrowding in prisons. After I spent about 10 hours a day, not joking, researching this topic and constantly visiting the school's library, talking to all the librarians, my expertise is almost as equal to as a scholar's. I think this topic is relevant not only to this classroom, but to all the citizens of America. You may ask why, but because each and every one of you will contribute your tax dollars and to fund these facilities. So you guys are all getting screwed over day by day. Think about that. So I will first be going over the financial aspect consisting of the expenses. Then I will talk about the inside support the inmates receive for addiction, such as job training, remedial programs, and last but not least, I will go over the physical dangers that holds a possibility inside the prison. There's a lot of violent stuff going around the prison, such as stabbings, like on a daily basis. Okay, so the standards for prisons have without doubt reached an all-time low throughout the past century. Most people do not know that it is very expensive to run a prison facility, especially when the amount of money prisoners have exceeded has reached the max capacity. The government can no longer afford to house potential inmates, which is sad considering that these people could hurt us any day. We could be walking in the streets and there could be a guy robbing us, or like he could vandalize our car. And the carrying a taser is not enough to defend ourselves, especially when it was bought off of Amazon. I was provided some insight on how deep the problem actually is. From a real life source, my uncle, who is a parole officer, he mentioned to me that when low-life drug addicts or homeless people commit a crime, they are not actually punished. Instead, they just put them inside a jail cell for a day, because the reality is that prisons don't have enough money to keep them in jail. Simply, the specific offenders are often in and out of jail. They actually prefer to be jailed, which is a harsh reality, but it is what it is. It's not surprised because instead of sleeping under a bridge, they'd rather sleep on the bed and be fed the next day. So I can understand why. If we take a closer look at the economy, one can easily see that things don't look so good at the moment. The increasing cost of prisons has raised uncontrollably throughout the years. Christian Hendrickson, a research director for the Vera Institute of Justice, describes the problem in the article, The Price of Prison, which says, state correction budgets have nearly quadrupled in the past 2 decades, yet the true taxpayer cost of a prison reaches far beyond these numbers. For clarification, even with all the tax rates increasing in California, our statewide budget still does not provide enough to actually cover the full cost of running a prison, because they have to consider that there's employee expenses, medical expenses, and expenses for programs to educate the prisoners. Okay, so now that I've gone over the financial aspect, let me introduce you to a more inmate-related issue. American prisons lack the recipe to improve the lives of the inmates, which are consistency of exposing them to the rehabilitation program. The rehabilitation budget has been cut back through the years. However, the states are not to blame, the federal government is. As stated in Michael Robsfeld's article, as rehab programs are cut, official plans to chop $250 million a year from rehabilitation services, more than 40% of what the state now devotes to them. And a quarter of the building is now lacking from the prison system. As you can see, the prisoners are lacking support. they can't get no help. A lot of them like suffer from diseases, so the prisons aren't able to provide them with enough like medical help, and a lot of them suffer from like alcoholism. So when they get out of jail, it's because they seem to head down the same path. The rehabilitation budget has been cut back through the states, has been cut back throughout the years. However, the states are not to blame. The federal government is. As stated in Michael Rothschild's article, as you can see, the prisoners are lacking support. Prison inmates also need all the help they can get so that they can prevent themselves from returning behind a jail cell. If they don't self-develop themselves, they're not going to be able to function properly in society. According to James Joller, the former director of Greenhouse Projects, beyond education and job placement, it is essential to address many health struggles undermining the prisoners' best intentions to lead successful lives. This is just an example of how overcrowded the prisons are. As you can see that a lot of them don't even have enough space to be comfortable. And with all the prisoners, they have a history of acting violent towards each other. It leads to problems. Like a fight could easily happen any moment. Even with all the tax rates increasing, California, statewide budgets cannot cover the cost of all the staffing. Clearly, the use of rehabilitation programs in prisons are essential. However, the lack of funds state otherwise. My third point is going to be that a lot of problems that occur in prison are because of the violence that occurs on a daily basis. Most people would believe that physical abuse in prisons occurs from the inmates themselves, but a lot of the time actually occurs from the staffing. According to the article, What We Know About Violence in American Prisons by Shane Farrer, 19% of all inmates in U.S. prisons say they've been physically assaulted by prison staff. For clarification, prison staff often get away with this kind of behavior because of their authority and their ability to reward prisoners. Prison culture has disengaged the inmates from interacting with the staff. In fact, prisoners often face consequences for not following the made-up code of conduct enlisted by the fellow prisoners. According to Janelle Blanco, a college instructor, if a person supplies guards with information about another prisoner, he or she is then known as a snitch. In some cases, snitches can be assaulted or stabbed by other prisoners. They'll be like listed as a target for like as long as they're in jail, so anyone is allowed to go ahead and stab them. And a lot of the prisoners, they won't really care about the consequences. So the dangers of prisons are accountable for prisoners working out because they need to stay fit in order to defend themselves. Overall, the overcrowding in prisons causes a burden on the entire U.S. population. From the talk with my uncle who told me prisons will send drug use back in the streets after one night, to the statistic which said the amount of money spent on prisons has quadrupled in the past few centuries, and the abuse by the prison staff, it is clear that the overcrowding in prison corrupts the prison structure in America. Before I end this speech, I will show you another picture. This is what a riot looks like in a prison. As you can see, there's a lot of people running around. Looks like there's fire, and there's probably prison police or whatever shooting people because they're not allowed to escape. So now, think about it. If prisons would not be as overcrowded, more money could go to fund all of your guys' college tuition instead of a murder. And you all wouldn't be such in debt. Simple as that. And that's my speech.
All right, Jasmine, what did you think?
I thought excuses was the harsh reality of U.S. prison and overcrowding in prison. I think his sources were strong. He just needed to spend a little bit more time explaining them or what they were saying. He moved on to good to other sources. I liked the picture that he used of the overcrowded prison. It really gave me a visual of what he was talking about. I think he could have been a little bit more organized. He didn't have a lot of transitions in his speech. And he could have read less from the paper. I liked his visuals. I think they were good and they actually helped his speech. They were talking about. Overall, I think his speech is really nice.
When you listen back to that, you'll be lucky if you hear any of it because she's way over there, the microphone's way here, and she's got kind of a quiet voice. So in the future, everybody shout them out. You know, we need to hear that. You'll get a couple of things there. You heard what she said though, right? You'll remember it. It's memorized now. All right, I like the dramatic visualization as the attention device. I thought you had a very clear thesis statement and a good justification for why we should be paying attention to this. There was also a pretty solid preview, so it's organized well at the beginning of the speech. It's a topical method of organization. Jasmine didn't care much for your transitions. She didn't notice them. I thought that you had a very good one, especially from the first point to the second point. Maybe not quite as consistent throughout the speech, but I did notice when you were moving from one idea to another, and it didn't seem too forced or obvious. The source citations, they're okay. I think sometimes you need to quote people a little bit more thoroughly so that we get a little bit more context. I won't say that you're paraphrasing, but it does sometimes sound like we're just getting the essence of what's being given there without enough explanation to go along with it. I didn't hear any information about some of the problems that you mentioned, rehab issues and alcoholism that are going on in the prisons. You said twice that the federal government was responsible for the lack of funds, and neither time did you provide any information to demonstrate that that was true. And I was surprised at that because it sounded like that's exactly what you were going to do, and then you didn't follow through on it. And then you did it again and didn't follow through on it a second time. So that was really confusing to me. The visual, excuse me, the visual images are okay. I think you've got two good pictures to illustrate some of the concepts you're talking about. I think there could be some things that are a little bit more integrated in the presentation and talk about some of the other issues that are discussed, but I thought the visualizations that you came up with were pretty effective. As far as delivery, you've got your hands in your pocket, you're reading too much, you just look a little bit like you are, in front of us as opposed to engaging us. And I think that there's a difference between those two things, and you need to be much more engaged. Your exit line indicates that there needs to be a little bit more planning also. That's my speech. I'm glad you spent a lot of time researching the subject. You defend yourself in regard to that. I think you need to spend a little bit of time prepping and rehearsing too. All right, thank you.